whole purpose of the podcast is to help people live in balance, well-being, and joy. I call this series Uncomplicated because if we know how to put yourself first, create harmony, give back and share, and always keep reaching. Once you have that solid foundation, everything else falls into place. Welcome to the Kamit Podcast, the Uncomplicated series. I'm Doris Bogus, your host, and I want to welcome you along this journey with me. Hi, welcome to the Kamit Podcast, the Uncomplicated series, where we focus on principles that help you live a life of balance, well-being, and joy. And I'm joined by my guest, Marva Hanks. Marva, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ms. Doris. I'm excited to be here and learn more about the Commit principles and keys.
That's the key to this podcast. We're going to learn how to implement. The purpose of this podcast is to be a light that reveals this information to listeners to help them live a life that's positive.
Okay. What motivated you to come up with the keys in the podcast?
Just the word commitment. I looked at that word commitment because I was stressing in a lot of areas in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? And so I came up with the concept of commit. Commit means to obligate, to bind, to dedicate to something. So the key to that is just focusing in. And when you focus in on something, you eliminate all the distractions that prevent you from living about a life of balance, well-being, and joy.
Okay. I know for myself, there's a menu of things that would stress me out. And part of the reasons that we met today is we have a mutual producer. Mm-hmm. So Walter Johnson Jr. helped elevate my podcast, Just Keep Living, because that's something that my dad would say to me whenever I would manifest out stress or have unanswered questions. So what would be some of the things that were stressing you out?
Well, just overwhelming, wearing many hats. Mm-hmm. I was a military wife. I moved around a lot. And so I had to do a lot of things on my own without help. And so I got into this rut of what I call the super self-sufficiency syndrome, where I thought I had to do everything by myself and I didn't need to ask for help. And what I did was I had to go inside and say, why am I like this? Why can't I ask for help? Because it carried over into my life. I'm not a military wife anymore, but I have still a lot of stress or a lot of anxiety about asking for help. So what I did was go back and research my childhood and the fact that I was a military wife and realize that that's not my lifestyle anymore.
It sounds like you were doing self-examination on identity.
Yes.
So you no longer had the label of a military wife?
Mm-hmm. Or roles that came along with it. Mm-hmm. And I needed self-care. I was overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. Right? I needed self-care. I needed harmony. All of that had gotten out of balance. It's like on a seesaw. One thing would be handled and then the next thing would come along and then I'm off balance again. Mm-hmm. And that's stressful.
Yeah.
That's stressful.
Right. So was there a tipping point for you?
The tipping point was I was overweight. I had a child that needed special care, so that drew me away from the things that I wanted to do. And I like creating. I like working out. I liked all those things. But what to focus on first? Mm-hmm. What if I let one thing go, then other thing and put other things first, myself first, then other things would drop off. And so that whole anxiety of how to balance. Mm-hmm. And so I thought if I could just focus in, then all of that would right itself. But I had to do some self-digging and self-discovery about what I needed to do that.
Right. I think there's some similarities, some synergy there, because I know I have had to travel and move a lot and be independent as a sports wife. Mm-hmm. So I know that when that career is over, whether by choice or whether by, other type of arrangements, by death, I've interviewed women that are widowed. And so self-discovery, reimagining the identity, the care for a special needs child. And so what was the cause and effect? So what would cause the weight? Was the weight caused by what decisions? And who told you, if you have a memory of, who told you that you had to do all of this by yourself?
Well, okay. The overweight was lack of knowledge about nutrition.
Okay.
Not enough time to prepare meals that you should prepare. Mm-hmm. handling all the other obligations that you have to do. And when I think back to my childhood, I was raised by a single mom.
Okay.
And so there was not a lot of support there. I saw her do everything by herself.
Okay.
I remember vividly not having a Christmas tree for Christmas. And my mom went outside and cut a hedge down and put lights on it. So she made do, and I was used to making do with what I had and not asking for help and not making waves. And so I knew that had to change because that's not my life anymore. I have a financial support. I don't need to do all of that any longer. So I had to straighten out my whole life. It was just not who I wanted to be.
So I think what I always like to distill down and get into is the origin. So you were a military wife. We were raised by a single mom, and then did you married a gentleman that was already in the military? What was the beginning of that relationship?
We met young, got married. I was there. We've been married for, I won't say how many years, but through med school, the whole deal. Went into the military as a military physician. And, when you travel somewhere and your mate has everything set up for them, you have to pick up the pieces, set up the household.
Like an expat wife.
Yeah, you have to do all that yourself. And so every time I would get started in a job or career, you've got to up and move and starting over. So you can see why that would be disorienting.
Right.
And you forget who you are. What your role is, I call it.
Yeah. Did you get to formulate any substantive relationships outside of the household?
Not as a military wife. I kind of no, actually.
Okay.
Now and today, I guess I would say that I'm still kind of what you would call a loner or a independent woman, as I would like to call myself now.
What I'm finding is that for me, this season of life that I'm in is people are circling back that were in my life maybe 20, 30 years ago. And it's been wonderful to get to have conversations about the vows that we made, the reasons why we were making the decisions that we were. When they start out a conversation of, I remember you when, and you hold your breath because you're hoping that we're being a good ambassador of the King of Kings. But then also finding that we can have rich, challenging conversations on why, or even giving more complex answers of, I remember that season of my life and I was so stressed because I was a mom and trying to be the best wife I knew to be from outside expectations. And so getting to address those things and them either affirming or confirming, like, I felt the same way, and no one is really coming together on the hard parts of life that are stressing both of us out. We're in the same space and trying to provide a life for our family. So that can be a default mechanism. So if you find yourself being independent now, do you have a desire to reach out and do more, explore more, connect more with people, or are you happy with your independence?
I find that right now in this season, I'm getting to know my brothers and sisters more.
Okay.
I moved away from home young, and there were age differences between some of us.
How many siblings?
The oldest age difference is 15 years. And that was my big brother, and so he just came to visit me, in fact, and we had a great time. But we reminisce about what it was like growing up, and that's bringing up old memories as to why I am the way I am and the way why he is the way he is. And it's helped me to come to peace, I guess, is what I'm looking for. This word I'm looking for with my background. And as far as moving forward, I think it's a work in progress.
So it's an older sibling and any other? You said siblings,
there's some younger
like
ones.
Plural. So how many siblings?
I had 6 brothers and 3 sisters. Now I'm down to 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So there were 10 of us.
It happens. Wow.
Yeah, so we had a big family. And as far as having thick skin with a big family, you know how I don't know if you have
just witnessed me bantering back and forth with
So yeah, Yeah, that's I'm used to, and maybe that's part of my defensive mechanism of not letting people in because I was the little quiet mouse in the corner, the middle child.
Were you the middle? That's what I was going to ask.
So you took a lot in from both sides. But right now, I like where I am. I'm committing to my own self-care and finding out what I need, and not so many of the other roles that I took on for whatever reason. And I'm finding my balance.
So finding your balance, is that one of your key principles, or what is the first key principle?
The first key principle is self-care.
Okay.
That's the first one. And
what does self-care look like for you?
That looks like finding time to devote to enough sleep, enough work, enough exercise and nutrition and family relationships, and having a downtime, a quiet, sacred space, I call it, where I can go and yell or scream or decompress and come back out. And how much time, and what do I want that to look like? How much time am I investing in those 7 foundational elements? And I call them foundational because they're common to all humans. They need sleep and food and nutrition and enough of it. But even though they're common, they're, each one has a unique way in which they manifest. Everybody's different. So they may apply to me or you differently.
Right.
And so those are the 7 foundational elements that I call necessary for self-care.
So if you're looking back at your younger self, Ms. Doris, what would you tell your younger self? Because when did you do your self-discovery?
I would say stop being a people pleaser. You don't have to be the middle child anymore who takes sides and don't want conflict, and just be there as a neutral person. Speak up. Say your piece. You matter. It's your birthright. You deserve self-care. Affirmations to myself. Okay. That's what I would tell myself then.
And so who's keeping you accountable?
I'm keeping myself accountable because who else is going to do it? Maya Angelou says, I've got my own back. You've got to have your own back at some point. You've got to be accountable for your actions and your failures.
That sounds good to me. Do you feel comfortable with your first podcast?
I do.
First episode.
Thank you, Miss Marva Hanks, for joining in.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear more.
Thank you. Marva, thank you for stopping by and joining me on this first Virgin podcast, the Uncomplicated series, the 4 Kamit Codes, and thank you for tuning in as well. And I hope you tune in next week where we will dive into more aspects of well-being, balance, and joy, harmony, Kamit Code 2 harmony, and how that impacts your life. And I'd like to leave you with this one thought: treat yourself well.